James, the team might have wrapped up the Constructors and the Drivers' Championships, but the Brazilian Grand Prix was far from easy, was it?
Very, very difficult. We went in there expecting it to be a tough race, and in fact Ferrari and Red Bull are both fierce adversaries at the moment, and indeed it was.
Well, let's go right back to the start, because of course you had Lewis starting from the pit lane. How do you approach that from a strategy point of view?
What we look at is what circumstances in the race we would need to have to happen in order for him to get back up onto, say, the podium or even win the race. And there are a number of them that could present themselves with specially timed safety cars or competitors making small number of mistakes.
Well, you mentioned the safety car, and of course that appeared fairly early on in the race. Was that a help or a hindrance? Were you expecting it so early?
A little bit of both, actually. The benefits were that we had a number of cars out of the race. Obviously, Esteban got taken out. We had Ricciardo that spun into turn 1. And actually, Lewis was up to 14th at that point in time from starting from the pit lane. That obviously is a huge benefit. Less traffic to get through. He's right up behind the pack. But there's a negative as well. The safety car did last for a certain number of laps. And as you saw when Lewis got going again, he was able to fight through traffic very, very efficiently. And actually, that was a number of laps that we lost where he would have been fighting through traffic.
So around lap 30, lap 27, you brought Valtteri in. It was almost like you were forced into that undercut. But what was your data telling you that made it make sense?
We knew that it was going to be extremely close on exit if we went for the undercut on that lap. We needed around 1.5 seconds from our calculations, and the gap was bobbling around 1.4 to 1.8 seconds. Just depends on where you looked on the lap. So we knew it would be very, very tight and everything had to be perfect. The soft tyre was very resilient, but had a little bit of warm-up on it. It wasn't the straightaway performance that you needed necessarily to make it work. But what we knew is the more we left it, the more likely that Ferrari were just going to stop, and you're not going to overcut here. You're not going to be faster once you're out in free air. So we decided to take it on lap 27. We had no traffic behind anymore. Massa and Alonso had moved out of the window, so it was the prime opportunity. When we did it, we actually came up 300 milliseconds alongside or just behind Vettel going into turn 4. So that's all we were missing, 300 milliseconds. And actually, we could find it. If you look at the pit lane times, you'll see there's just 0.3 missing between us and Sebastian, and that would have been just enough.
How disappointing. Let's go further into the race. You brought Lewis in. At this point, he's in 4th position. What were your expectations there? He'd already cleared a lot of traffic.
I mean, to that point already, he'd done an extremely impressive job. There was never more than 1 lap behind any of the cars leading to that point. So he's overtaken to that point 10 cars, never spending more than a few corners behind them. And he overtook everywhere. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 6 around there is a fantastic overtake. So he did a really good job up to this point in time. The expectation was still fighting for the podium. I mean, the reality was by lap 60, we knew that Sebastian was probably out of touch. But if he could get through Kimi in a few laps, he'd be up against Valtteri, and anything can happen. But the reality is we thought podium was absolutely on the cards for him right now.
Well, let's have a little look, because just over your shoulder there, we've got track temperature of 56, but it actually peaked at 60. So how did that affect the tyres and the strategies?
All the practice work that we did on Friday was around about 45 to 50 degrees, so quite a bit cooler than what we had in the race. And everyone was struggling in the race. These tyres did do a one-stop, but they were on a limit of doing a one-stop strategy. And especially for Lewis, who had to fight through traffic, he really struggled. All the temperatures went very, very high. It's normal. You slide around a lot more as you're following another car and get through it. And by the end of the race, the reality was when we caught Kimi, there was just not enough tyre left for him to be able to attack him.
So eventually, P2 and P4, was that all that was on the table? You alluded to the fact that potentially a podium was there for Lewis. Was there a win there for Valtteri?
Both were on the table. The reality was Valtteri started on pole. They both had, both Sebastian and Valtteri had wheel spin at the start of the race. Wheel spin is effectively you've just either applied too much throttle or lost grip at the rear. And you have to control it. The drivers now are very much in control of the start. Sebastian did a slightly better job. You saw just nosed into turn 1. But from that point onwards, as we discussed, we still had that undercut possible. And if everything had been perfect, it wasn't. If everything had been perfect, the 2 cars would have been alongside. So there were 2 opportunities for Valtteri, definitely for the win. For Lewis, a win was absolutely on the cards, even from starting from the pit lane. He was extraordinary in the race and how he caught himself back up again. And the reality is we just needed a safety car, not at the beginning, but a little bit later on in the race to essentially bring him much, much closer to the field on the super soft tyre, and then you would have seen a spectacular finish.
Well, talking of spectacular finish, 1 race left to go, James, and then we'll be at the end of the championship. We'll see you in Abu Dhabi.
Absolutely, look forward to it.